Elliot Warren stood in the middle of the courtroom, his mop still in hand. A profound silence fell over the room as every eye turned to him. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear, mixed with a fierce, burning determination. His fingers whitened as they tightened around the worn handle of his mop, as if it were the only thing tethering him to the ground. At the defense table, Ariana Lockhart sat alone. A billionaire, a titan of industry, now utterly abandoned by her own high-priced lawyers. Her hands trembled in her lap, and her usually sharp blue eyes were clouded with sheer exhaustion. She stared at Elliot, her expression a cocktail of disbelief and raw desperation. Who was this man? The quiet janitor who spent his days in the shadows of the courthouse. No one in that room could have possibly imagined that he was about to change everything. For 15 long years, Elliot had been invisible. He was a ghost in the halls of justice, arriving before dawn to clean the courtrooms, polish the judges' benches, and empty the trash cans of the powerful. He moved through the legal world as an unseen observer, a silent witness to its grand dramas. He didn't own a television, never read the news, but he knew the inner workings of this place better than almost anyone, because he listened, he paid attention, he absorbed every whispered strategy, every boastful confession, every frustrated sigh from lawyers who thought they were alone. It wasn't always this way. 15 years ago, Elliot had a corner office, a stunning view of the Manhattan skyline, and a reputation as a rising star at a prestigious law firm. He was brilliant, undefeated in major cases, with a future that seemed limitless. Then, in an instant, it all came crashing down. Corporate backstabbing, false accusations, the gut-wrenching loss of his license to practice law. His life, his dreams, were shredded into pieces. Now, he lived a life of quiet solitude in a tiny one-room apartment. One bed, one stove, and one wall adorned with two precious photographs. The first was a wedding photo of his beloved Sarah, her smile radiant. The second, a picture of their daughter Mia, beaming in her mother's arms. His mornings began with black coffee and dry toast, every penny carefully counted. And yet, he still managed to send a little money to Mia whenever he could, even though she always, gently, refused to take it. That morning had started like any other, at 5 a.m., with the soft autumn sunlight just beginning to spill through the tall windows. Elliot finished cleaning the floors of courtroom throw 2. He pushed his heavy cart down the long, echoing hallway, pausing for a moment as he always did. He gazed into the grand chamber where some of the nation's most significant cases had been argued. In that quiet moment, he felt the immense weight of all he had seen and heard. 15 years of observation, of silence, of knowing the law with an intimacy that few of the people who now filled these rooms could ever claim. By 9 a.m., the courtroom was a chaotic scene. Reporters jostled for the best seats, the frantic clicking of keyboards filling the air. Lawyers in expensive suits adjusted their ties, their faces grim. And at the center of it all, Ariana Lockhart sat, a solitary figure at the vast defense table. Her legal team was nowhere to be seen. She had called them, texted them, her messages growing more frantic with each passing minute. But there was no answer, only silence. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Caroline Fisk, a woman known for her stern demeanor and sharp legal mind, entered and took her seat. Her eyes swept the room, her brow furrowing at the sight of the empty chairs beside the defendant. "Miss Lockhart," she began, her voice crisp. "Where are your attorneys?" Ariana struggled to her feet, trying to maintain her composure, but her voice trembled as she spoke. "Your Honor, they were here yesterday. I've been trying to contact them all morning, but ... double quotes." Her voice trailed off, the unanswered calls hanging heavy in the air. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman with a thin, triumphant smile, rose from her table. "Your Honor," she declared, her voice ringing with confidence, "given the defense's failure to appear, the prosecution moves for a default judgment." The room erupted in a storm of whispers. The tension was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. Ariana swayed on her feet, the last of her hope draining away. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. "I will protect her." The words, though cracked with disuse, were warm and deep, resonating through the courtroom like distant thunder. Every head swiveled. There stood the janitor, the invisible man, the figure who for 15 years had never uttered a word in court. He stood tall, his mop forgotten at his side, ready to defend Ariana Lockhart. A few soft chuckles broke the silence, then grew louder as the absurdity of the situation sank in. A janitor? But Elliot didn't flinch. He calmly set his mop against a spectator bench and began to walk up the center aisle. Decades of cleaning floors had not managed to erase the commanding presence he once possessed. The posture of a seasoned lawyer, the unshakable confidence of a man who had once commanded these very rooms. Judge Fisk raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And who, might I ask, are you?" Elliot stopped before the bench, his gaze steady. "My name is Elliot Warren, Your Honor, and I would like to represent Miss Lockhart." The courtroom buzzed, whispers running like wildfire through the rows of spectators. "The janitor wants to be a lawyer." The prosecutor stared at him, her smile replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Elliot met her gaze without blinking. "I was a member of the New York Bar Association for 18 years. From an inner pocket of his uniform, he produced a worn leather wallet and removed his old bar card. It was faded, but the details were clear, still valid. The judge took the card, examining it closely. The courtroom held its breath. An eternity seemed to pass in that single, silent moment. Then, Judge Fisk nodded slowly. 15 years is a long time to be out of practice. Mr. Warren, she paused, her eyes searching his. But your credentials appear to be in order. Ariana looked at Elliot, truly looked at him for the first time. In his eyes, she saw, not desperation, not a fool's ambition, but a sincere, unwavering determination. A flicker of hope, something she thought had been extinguished forever, sparked within her. She stood, her voice stronger now. Your Honor, she announced, her gaze fixed on the man in the janitor's uniform. I accept Mr. Warren as my counsel. The fight was not over. It had just begun. The judge gave them 15 minutes to confer. As the courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers, Elliot moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. He approached the defense table, a place he once knew so well, now foreign territory. A security guard immediately stepped in his way, his voice a low grumble. Only attorneys are allowed in this area, sir. Without a word, Elliot produced his bar card, faded and worn from years of disuse. The guard squinted at it, then at the judge, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of confirmation. The barrier was gone. Elliot stepped forward, into the small, charged space around Ariana. In that brief, intense conversation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. This wasn't a simple case of a client being abandoned by her legal team. This was a setup, a meticulously orchestrated conspiracy. It was the kind of intricate legal trap that only someone who had lived and breathed the law, who understood its darkest corners, could even begin to see, let alone dismantle. He listened, but he wasn't just hearing her words. He was listening to the pauses, the slight hesitation before a crucial detail, the flicker of fear in her eyes, and the stubborn spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. Ariana explained her creation, a quantum processor that could operate at room temperature. It wasn't just an invention, it was a revolution, a breakthrough that could redefine computing, solve the world's energy crisis, and change the very nature of data itself. And now, the corporate giant she once trusted was accusing her of stealing her own life's work. The clock on the courtroom wall was merciless. The 15 minutes felt like 15 seconds. They shared every detail, every piece of information, every suspicion. Plans began to form in Elliot's mind, a rusty machine kicking back to life. He knew this was more than just a legal battle. Preparation alone wouldn't be enough. His mind raced, pulling memories from the depths of his long-lost practice. Cases, precedents, strategies, it all came flooding back. A torrent of legal knowledge he thought was gone forever. He had to find the truth, the core of it, and build his entire case around it. The courtroom waited, a silent arena of judgment. The jury watched, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The 15 minutes were up. Elliot took his place at the defense table, no longer a janitor in a borrowed suit, but a defender. He placed his hand on the smooth, cool wood of the podium and took a single, deep breath. He looked directly at the 12 faces that held Ariana's fate in their hands. When he spoke, his voice was not the booming rhetoric of a high-priced lawyer. It was simple, sincere. He talked less about legal jargon and more about fundamental justice, about truth. He reminded them that the truth doesn't care about the price of a suit or the size of a law firm's skyscraper office. It depends on courage, on integrity, on the simple, unwavering willingness to stand for what is right, even when you're standing alone. The lead prosecutor rose, a picture of confidence and poise, his suit impeccable, his smile predatory. He represented a firm with unlimited resources, a legal Goliath. Yet for the first time in a decade and a half, Elliot felt no fear. He had waited 15 years for this moment, for a chance to reclaim the man he once was. He would not fail, not her, not himself. This was the start, the spark that would ignite a firestorm. This was the moment a janitor became a defender. The moment a brilliant inventor on the verge of losing everything found a sliver of hope in the most unexpected of allies. This was the day a courtroom would witness something it had never seen before, courage appearing in its most humble, and therefore most powerful, form. As Elliot prepared to deliver his opening statement, the courtroom doors opened, and the prosecution's first witness was called to the stand. It was a tech analyst, a so-called expert, armed with a mountain of documents and carefully crafted claims designed to bury Ariana. Under a landslide of fabricated evidence, every eye in the room, every camera, every juror, turned to Elliot. The battle had just begun, and the first shot had been fired. He had to act fast, think faster, because he knew the truth wasn't just a matter for the courts to decide. It was a war against powerful, unseen enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their lives. The clock was ticking, and the fight for justice had truly begun. The courtroom felt heavier than ever as Elliot took his seat after his opening statement. The jury watched intently. Some were skeptical, some curious, others quietly impressed. Across the aisle, the prosecution prepared their first witness, a tech analyst named Dr. Leonard Bryce, polished, confident, and poised to deliver testimony that could utterly destroy Ariana's case. Dr. Bryce stepped up to the stand, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. His polished air gave the impression of complete control. He began explaining his analysis, claiming Ariana's designs were nearly identical to Nexus Innovations' internal records. Every chart, every equation, every timeline. He painted a narrative where Ariana Lockhart had blatantly stolen proprietary algorithms. The jury listened, the tension in the room thickening with every word. Elliot remained calm, silent, absorbing every word, every pause, every hesitation. Then, it was his turn for cross-examination. He rose slowly, carrying a thin, worn file. Every step was measured, every motion deliberate. The years of absence from the courtroom melted away as instinct and experience flooded back. The questions came naturally. Details unraveled effortlessly. Contradictions emerged. Timelines didn't match. Documents didn't align. Evidence that had been buried was now illuminated for all to see. Dr. Bryce claimed he had developed the core algorithms from January through March. Elliot held up the first document, a piece of undeniable evidence. The court could see it clearly. Dr. Bryce couldn't have worked on the project before he was hired in April. A wave of shock spread through the room. The witness stammered, his confident composure shattering into a million pieces. Elliot lifted a second document. Server logs from Nexus Innovations itself. They showed the core algorithms were completed before Bryce was ever employed. Murmurs erupted in the courtroom. The prosecution flailed, their objections flying, but Elliot remained calm, and the judge ruled in his favor. The evidence was allowed. Truth was advancing. He turned back to Dr. Bryce, his questions now sharper, more focused. He asked about payments, about motivations, about inconsistencies in testimony. The witness froze. Elliot then named a specific payment, $300,000, received from Nexus Innovations just 2 weeks prior, a bribe, a reward for false testimony. The courtroom gasped. Reporters typed frantically, cameras flashing. Elliot's voice cut through the chaos like steel as he requested the transaction be entered into evidence and the witness be charged with perjury. Fear was visible in the eyes of the prosecution. They had not expected a man they dismissed as a janitor to dismantle their entire case with such surgical precision. As the hearing concluded, Elliot and Ariana stepped into the crowded hall. Reporters shouted questions, their cameras firing bright flashes of light. Elliot lowered his head, guiding Ariana through the storm with a soft hand on her back. She finally exhaled when the taxi door shut. Her questions came quickly. How did you know about the payment? Elliot calmly explained. Sometimes patterns reveal the truth. Money leaves a trail. Information can be pieced together. It was a combination of guesswork and instinct. Then, he introduced her to his daughter, Mia, a digital marketing expert, an investigator, resourceful, and incredibly precise. An hour later, they sat in a small cafe in Queens, far removed from the world of wealth and high-profile cases. Mia opened her laptop. She had begun analyzing Nexus Innovations. On the surface, a clean corporate history. But beneath the surface, she found layered ownership structures, shell companies, and disturbing connections to a name from Elliot's past, Atlantic Energy Corporation. Elliot froze. Atlantic Energy, the company that had destroyed his career 15 years ago. The pieces fell into place. They realized this was bigger than a simple legal dispute. This was an organized campaign to erase Ariana and her technology. Her work threatened the profits of an empire. Her technology could revolutionize energy storage, potentially making fossil fuels obsolete. And the powerful people behind that empire would not allow that to happen. Mia's research revealed campaign contributions, interlocking board memberships, and deep ties to energy conglomerates and defense contractors. Every step was designed to control outcomes, to control the narrative. Elliot's mind raced, every memory of past betrayal returning. Every lesson from his years of being silenced now being applied in real time. They were being watched, manipulated, opposed, but they had each other, and they had a growing plan, a strategy grounded in evidence and law. Justice wouldn't come easily, but they were determined to fight. They moved quickly, heading back to Ariana's mansion. Their safety was now the top priority. The threats became real and immediate. The apartment in Queens was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but everything was destroyed. It was a clear message. Mia's laptop was compromised. Hacking attempts were detected. Ariana's car was nearly hit in what was clearly a targeted attack. The world had made its intentions obvious. They were targets. Elliot negotiated the move into the guest house. It was secure, separate from Ariana's main estate, yet still luxurious, still alien to him. He observed every corner, measured every shadow, Every space was unfamiliar, but he stayed focused. The stakes were higher than ever. There was no room for distractions. Ariana and Mia stood by his side. A team was forming, a partnership forged under intense pressure. Trust grew with each passing hour. Elliot's past experience, Ariana's innovation, Mia's investigative skills together, they began to see a way forward. Evidence was lined up, plans were formed, threats were mitigated, but they knew the opposition wouldn't rest. They had seen it before, and they were feeling it now. Elliot reminded them, the battle is only beginning. The courtroom is a stage, but the real war unfolds behind the scenes. Every document, every detail, every move mattered, and the clock was ticking. As night fell, they began to uncover critical evidence from Ariana's assistant, Julia, files that could expose the entire conspiracy. But revealing the truth meant risking their lives. Every choice now carried immense danger, and the enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their empire were already in motion. It was past 2 in the morning when Julia Fenwick stumbled into the mansion, looking like she'd been dragged through a hurricane. Her clothes were a mess, her hair was a windswept tangle, and her eyes were wide with the terror that seemed to swallow the room. Security, already on high alert, immediately notified Ariana Elliot. For safety, Ariana met Julia in a small, separate room. You could never be too careful. This could easily be a trap. The moment she was inside, Julia practically collapsed, her body trembling so violently it was hard for her to stand. Words tumbled out of her, broken and desperate. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, over and over. "For everything. For copying the files, for passing the information, for staying silent when I knew what was happening." Ariana and Elliot listened, their minds racing to connect the dots. Who was she working for? Who had twisted her arm so tightly she'd betray them? Julia finally confessed. It was Gregory Vance, the CEO of Nexus Innovations. Months ago, he'd approached her, armed with a secret from her past, a minor embezzlement charge from a previous job. Even though she'd paid it all back, the crime was still on her record. Vance held it over her head, threatening her with prison unless she cooperated. She felt she had no choice. She'd handed over sensitive data, shared Ariana's strategies, and even planted false information to frame Ariana for accessing Nexus's research. Ariana looked at Julia, a storm of emotions swirling inside her: confusion, anger, and a deep, aching hurt. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of pity. Julia then pulled out a phone and handed it to Elliot. Vance's phone. It was a digital bombshell, packed with messages, emails, and call recordings, the entire conspiracy laid bare on a single device. Elliot held it like a live grenade, knowing it could either save them or get them all killed. Just then, Mia appeared silently in the doorway, a ghost in the shadows. She'd been watching, making sure they were safe. Julia's voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "If they realize the phone is gone, they'll know. They'll retaliate. I came straight here because I had nowhere else to go." The truth settled heavily on Ariana. The woman who had betrayed her so deeply had also just risked everything to give them a fighting chance. Elliot looked at Julia with a new kind of respect. Yes, she'd made a terrible mistake, but her remorse was undeniable, and her courage in coming here was immense. This was someone desperate to make things right. Without wasting a second, they sprang into action. Mia, a blur of motion on her laptop, began backing up every file from Vance's phone, creating encrypted, redundant copies. Nothing could be left to chance. Elliot turned to Julia, explaining the urgency. She had to disappear, at least until this was all over. Julia nodded, confirming she had family in Canada and could leave immediately. No packing, no goodbyes, just a straight shot to safety. 20 minutes later, the data was secure, and Julia was in a taxi, her eyes fixed forward, never once looking back. As the taillights faded into the night, Elliot couldn't help but wonder if she'd survive. Had they made the right choice, trusting her? Ariana stood beside him, her voice soft but firm. "She was brave," she said. Elliot nodded. "Sorry doesn't erase the damage," he replied, "but courage can redeem it." They finally had the evidence, the raw power to take down Nexus Innovations and Atlantic Energy. But the timing had to be perfect. The second Vance realized his phone was missing, they'd face an all-out assault. Morning came, painting the sky with colors that did nothing to ease the suffocating tension. They spent hours poring over the evidence, every text, every email, every recorded call from that phone. They made plans, assessed threats, and double-checked every security measure. And then, it happened. Alarms blared through the mansion. Security reported a breach at the main gate. Multiple armed individuals. Maddox, the head of security, didn't hesitate. His voice was calm but urgent as he identified the intruders on the monitors. "Mercenaries," he said. "Ex-military or private contractors. Highly trained, highly precise. There was no escape. The main house was compromised, the back exit blocked. They were trapped." Maddox acted swiftly, directing them to a reinforced safe room hidden behind a wine cabinet in the basement. It was a concrete tan steel box, with its own surveillance monitors and a hard line to emergency services. Inside, the panic was palpable. Mia was shaking, and Ariana was fighting to keep her composure. On the screens, the mercenaries moved with a chilling efficiency, a silent, deadly dance through the corridors of the mansion. Maddox and his team fought back with incredible skill, defending every hallway, covering every angle. A guard fell, a mercenary was taken down, but the intruders kept coming, advancing systematically, relentlessly, toward the basement. A terrifying realization dawned on Elliot and Ariana. They knew where they were. They had plans for the safe room. Maybe Julia had unintentionally revealed its location, or maybe the floor plans had been compromised long ago. It didn't matter, the door wouldn't hold forever. A sensor beeped, explosives detected. A countdown timer blinked on the screen. Seconds ticking away. Elliot frantically dialed 911, reporting armed assailants with explosives. The operator confirmed units were on their way. 3 minutes out, she said. It felt like an eternity. Ariana's hand squeezed his, and he met her gaze, his own resolve hardening. This is not how it ends, he promised. They had come too far to give up now. And then, the impossible happened. A flood of flashing lights, police vehicles, SWAT trucks, and armored units descended on the estate like a force of nature. The mercenaries froze, exchanged signals, and retreated, leaving the explosives behind, undetonated. Mia let out a choked sob of relief that echoed the feeling in the room. They were safe, for now. The weight of years seemed to lift from Elliot's shoulders. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Soon after, Agent Blake Hollister from the FBI arrived. He confirmed that Julia was safe, under protective custody in Canada, her testimony secured. It was official. The evidence from Vance's phone, combined with Julia's cooperation, gave them the leverage they needed to finally start dismantling this corrupt empire from the inside out. The next steps were clear: evidence analysis, witness preparation, and legal strategy. They couldn't rely on luck or last-minute rescues anymore. Every move had to be calculated, every risk considered. The fight for justice had entered a new, more dangerous phase. Their enemies, those who would stop at nothing to protect their empire, were now fully aware of the threat. They were watching, waiting for their next move. The very next day, the atmosphere in court was electric. Elliot's quiet competence, backed by an overwhelming mountain of evidence, had the prosecution reeling. These new developments weren't just shaking things up. They were threatening to bring an entire corporate empire crashing down. But the wheels of justice turned slowly. Would the legal system move fast enough to protect Ariana? And with the stakes higher than ever, could Elliot maintain control of the case under such unprecedented pressure? The game had changed, and everyone was about to find out who would be left standing. The morning light filtered through the tall courthouse windows, casting long streaks across the marble floors as Elliot walked in. His thrift shop suit, crisp and clean for the first time since the trial began. The story of the janitor-turned-lawyer had spread quickly across the city. Reporters jostled for space, cameras clicked endlessly, and whispers ran through the courtroom like an undercurrent of anticipation. Every gaze was on him, but Elliot remained focused on the one thing that mattered: the truth. Inside, Catherine Morris waited, poised and confident as ever. Her deep red suit, with its sharp shoulders, gave her an aura of someone who believed the case was already hers. She smiled thinly as Elliot approached the defense table and placed his folder of evidence carefully before him. He opened it just enough to glance at the documents, records, and messages that could topple a corporate empire if handled correctly. The first witness for the day stepped up, Dr. Proyan Leonard Bryce, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, carrying the polished air of academia. His testimony began smoothly, a practiced story. He claimed credit for developing the algorithms central to Ariana's quantum technology. His voice was calm, measured, but Elliot noticed the subtle inconsistencies he had memorized while reviewing every detail overnight. When his turn came, Elliot rose slowly, walking to the lectern, holding a thin file in one hand. His voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. "Dr. Bryce," he said gently, "you testified that you developed Quantum Core's algorithms from January through March of 2021, correct?" "That is correct," Bryce replied. Elliot held up the first document. "This is your employment record. Would you read your start date for the court?" Bryce glanced down, his face palling. "April 21st, 2021. Elliot said firmly and turned to the jury. "So, you could not have developed the algorithms between January and March because you were not employed yet." A ripple of shock ran through the courtroom. Elliot held up the second document server logs from Quantum Core showing the project completed March 15th, 2021, before Bryce was even hired. "Would you like to explain how you contributed to a project that existed before your employment?" Bryce stammered, no words coming out. Elliot turned back to the jury, speaking clearly. "This is evidence of false testimony and potential bribery." He looked directly at Bryce. 2 weeks before testifying, you received a $300,000 payment from Nexus Innovations. Was this compensation, or was it a bribe? Bryce froze, cornered and exposed. It was yes, he admitted, his voice a defeated whisper. A bribe. The word hung in the air for a moment before the courtroom erupted. Murmurs swirled as journalists typed furiously. Elliot turned to Judge Rourke. Your Honor, I move to enter this evidence and request that the witness be charged with perjury. Judge Rourke considered a moment, then nodded. Motion granted. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted immediately. Fear replaced confidence in Catherine Morris's eyes. She had never expected that a janitor could dismantle a case so methodically and uncover evidence she had unseen or even considered. The prosecution scrambled to recover, but the tide had already turned. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed relentlessly as Elliot guided Ariana through the chaos of reporters. Their questions were rapid and demanding. He kept a firm hand on her back, a protective barrier in the storm of scrutiny. Only when they were inside a taxi did Ariana finally speak. How did you know about the payment to Bryce? She asked, her voice tight with curiosity and disbelief. Elliot opened his canvas briefcase, revealing old notes, cross-referenced emails, and server logs. I didn't know for certain, he said calmly, but in cases like this, money always leaves a trail. I made an educated guess based on patterns and cross-checked it with multiple sources. His eyes softened when he looked at Ariana. You bluff occasionally, she whispered, a small smile forming. Elliot only shrugged lightly, almost apologetically. Yet the precision of his instincts had brought them here. An hour later, they met Mia in a small cafe in Queens, her laptop open and ready. She had already begun tracing the complex web of corporate connections, linking Nexus Innovations to Atlantic Energy. The evidence she uncovered shocked them all. Shell companies in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, hidden behind layers of ownership, all tracing back to the same energy conglomerate that had destroyed Elliot 15 years earlier. This was bigger than a lawsuit. This was a coordinated campaign to erase Ariana and her technology and protect a trillion-dollar industry. Elliot leaned back, absorbing the magnitude of what Mia revealed. They had to move quickly or risk losing everything. Again, he realized the value of his daughter's skill and determination. She had grown into an ally, a partner in ways he couldn't have imagined. By late afternoon, they had relocated to Ariana's guest house, protected by security. The stark difference between Elliot's small Queens apartment and the sprawling estate was jarring. Yet he understood the necessity. Safety first, the battle second. They reviewed plans, checked backups, and reinforced digital security. Every precaution was taken. At 2 in the morning, Julia arrived, bringing critical evidence. She held out a phone, explaining how her betrayal had been coerced. Her willingness to cooperate now could secure the case. Elliot instructed Mia to immediately copy the data onto encrypted servers. No piece of evidence could be left unsecured. They worked efficiently, a silent, focused team, knowing Vance and his operatives would react quickly once they were aware of the missing phone. The night passed, tense but orderly, and by sunrise, every piece of information was secure. The team was prepared, ready to face whatever came next. The challenge now was legal strategy, managing threats, and ensuring that this massive conspiracy would finally face justice. Elliot reflected on the path that had brought him here. The janitor who had once mopped courthouse floors now held the leverage to take down the powerful figures who had orchestrated his downfall. Ariana's trust and courage had given him a renewed sense of purpose, and Mia's resourcefulness had created a bridge to uncover hidden truths. Together, they had become a formidable team, a blend of skill, courage, and intellect, ready to confront an entrenched network willing to use every means to protect its power. The morning sunlight through the estate windows cast shadows that seemed long enough to reach across the city. They were ready. The legal battle was about to escalate, and Elliot Warren understood one truth clearly. Justice doesn't wait for preparation or wealth. It demands courage, resolve, and unwavering commitment. The enemies they faced were powerful, but so was the force of truth in determined hands. The next session of court would determine if their evidence would dismantle the conspiracies piece by piece, or if the weight of corporate power would attempt to crush them again. In the next chapter, the courtroom will face the shocking evidence from the stolen phone. Elliot and Ariana will confront the conspirators head-on. Corporate power and bribery will clash with integrity and truth. The next move could destroy or vindicate their lives. Who will prevail when the forces of greed meet the determination of the righteous? The next morning, Elliot arrived at the courthouse with a quiet determination. It was a stark contrast to the storm brewing behind those polished marble doors. Reporters swarmed the entrance, cameras ready, hoping for a glimpse of the janitor-turned-liar who had shaken the city to its core. His thrift shop suit, pressed and neat, no longer drew laughter. People had stopped laughing and started watching, very closely. Inside the courtroom, Catherine Morris rose immediately. Her confident posture was a mask for the unease creeping under her skin. She strode toward the lectern, ready to continue her narrative, but Elliot was prepared. He had spent the entire night poring over Mia's research, Julia's phone data, and the server backups. Every single contradiction, every gap in the prosecution's story had been identified. He had a plan. The first witness returned to the stand. It was Dr. Bryce, nervously adjusting his glasses. Elliot noticed the subtle shaking of his hands. He had no idea what was about to happen. The moment Elliot's voice cut through the silence, the entire room changed. "Dr. Bryce," he began, his voice calm and measured. "You testified yesterday about developing the core algorithms between January and March of 2021, correct?" "That is correct," Bryce muttered, his eyes avoiding Elliot's. Elliot placed a set of documents, the employment record and server logs, in front of the jury and the witness. "Do these documents align with your testimony, Dr. Bryce? Your start date is April 21st, 2021, and the logs show the project was completed on March 15th, 2021. He looked at Bryce, patiently waiting. Bryce faltered, swallowing hard. The contradictions were impossible to deny. The jury leaned forward, sensing the shift in tension. Murmurs spread through the spectators as reporters typed furiously, their fingers flying across keyboards. Elliot continued his questioning, layering facts over inconsistencies. His calm voice was a weapon, dismantling the witness's credibility piece by piece. "You also received a payment of $300,000 from Nexus Innovations, correct?" Bryce nodded reluctantly, his face pale. Elliot's eyes scanned the courtroom, then settled back on the doctor. "I ask again, was this compensation, or was it a bribe?" Bryce's voice trembled. "It was a payment for my testimony." Elliot fixed his gaze on him. "The truth sounds like a bribe, not compensation." The room erupted. Whispers turned to audible gasps. Reporters scribbled frantically. The weight of Elliot's argument had shifted the entire balance of the trial. A juror whispered to another as Elliot laid out the evidence and the timeline, carefully showing not just false testimony, but the orchestration behind it. The powerful combination of facts and clarity was undeniable. Even Catherine Morris could no longer hide the tension in her posture. After Bryce was dismissed, a broken man, Elliot approached Ariana. He whispered, "We need to prepare for the next witness." They had gathered everything they needed for a complete dismantling of Nexus Innovations' narrative, from emails to internal memos, all showing how evidence had been manipulated against her. He handed Ariana the copy of Julia's phone data, ensuring she understood each key point, every detail that proved the conspiracy. Meanwhile, Mia's eyes stayed glued to her laptop screen, tracking the data in real time. She pointed out a series of encrypted emails exchanged between Nexus executives and Preston Holloway's firm, Schmidt and Partners. They showed deliberate sabotage against Ariana's defense. The coordination was precise, calculated, and ruthless. Elliot realized they were up against not just a corporation, but an entire network built to eliminate any threat to their wealth. By noon, the courtroom was tense and silent. Everyone understood the stakes. This was no longer an ordinary trial. It had become a battle of truth versus corporate power. Every word Elliot spoke carried weight. Every document he revealed struck a blow against the conspiracy. The spectators in the gallery felt the drama unfolding in a way that transcended normal legal proceedings. Then, Elliot called his next witness, Julia Fenwick. She walked to the stand cautiously, her posture stiff but her face resolute. She recounted how she had been coerced to manipulate data and pass false information to Nexus executives and their allies. Her testimony confirmed what Elliot had suspected all along. Ariana's previous legal team had been compromised from the start, and her own career and life were being targeted for destruction. The room held its collective breath as Julia's story unfolded, clear and unwavering. She revealed the threats, the financial inducements, and the intimidation tactics designed to force her compliance. Her courage shone through the fear evident in her trembling hands as she held the microphone. The clarity of her confession left no doubt in anyone's mind. Elliot leaned in during his questioning, gently but firmly guiding Julia through the key points. He emphasized the timeline, the emails, the secret meetings she had attended. He allowed her to speak, but directed the conversation carefully, so the jury could see the pattern of deceit orchestrated to silence Ariana and protect the interests of Atlantic Energy and Nexus Innovations. After Julia finished, Elliot stood and addressed the jury calmly. "My name is Elliot Warren," he began, his voice steady and precise. "For 15 years, I have watched justice unfold in this very courtroom. I have seen truth hidden and manipulated by power. Today, the evidence shows a coordinated campaign to destroy not only a person, but the very technology that could change our future." The jury's eyes never left him. He presented the files, the charts, the communications methodically, piece by piece, leaving no room for doubt. By the end of the day, every observer in that room knew the tide had turned. Elliot had completely dismantled the prosecution's narrative. He had proved that Ariana had been framed, orchestrated, and betrayed by those she trusted most. The story had expanded beyond corporate theft to a calculated attempt to erase innovation and maintain the status quo of billion-dollar energy empires. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed Elliot and Ariana outside. Cameras flashed, and questions were fired at them. Rapid fire, but Elliot focused only on Ariana, checking her safety and composure. Each nod of reassurance and whispered instruction reinforced their unity. Mia joined them shortly after, her shift at the laptop finally complete. The team now had a clear path forward. They had irrefutable evidence of bribery, perjury, and deliberate obstruction of justice. They knew the next session would be decisive, possibly final. The momentum was theirs, and Elliot felt a surge of confidence as he prepared for the final showdown. Back at Ariana's estate that evening, they regrouped. They reviewed every piece of evidence, planned for the next court session, and fortified their digital files, backing up all the sensitive documents. They rehearsed the presentation of Julia's testimony, step by step. It was meticulous, careful work, but the alternative, losing everything, was unthinkable. As they sat together in the study, Elliot reflected on how far they had come. Just weeks ago, he was a janitor, quietly observing cases from the back. Now, he was leading a legal assault against some of the most powerful adversaries in the world, fighting for the future of technology and the lives of the innocent. The night passed, but the tension hung thick in the air. They all knew the next day could decide everything. The evidence was clear. The jury was watching, and the truth felt unstoppable. But the forces they faced would not go down quietly. Elliot looked at Ariana and Mia. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. They were ready. They would face the coming storm together, with every step courageous, calculated, and unyielding. The court would see the full extent of the sabotage and bribery. Justice was finally within reach. The next morning, Elliot, Ariana, and Mia arrived at the courthouse before dawn. The cold New York air was sharp against their faces. Reporters and camera crews were already gathering outside, buzzing with anticipation. The story of the janitor-turned-lawyer leading a billionaire's defense had become a citywide sensation. Everyone wanted a front-row seat to witness the conclusion. Inside, the courtroom was tense but orderly. Judge Matthew Rourke, newly assigned after Judge Fisk recused herself, took his seat with an air of authority. He addressed the room briefly. "We are here to continue proceedings with all relevant witnesses present and evidence submitted. Let us proceed." Catherine Morris, for the prosecution, rose to her feet. Her posture was stiff, her polished confidence slipping slightly under the weight of Elliot's relentless cross-examinations and the overwhelming evidence brought forth the day before. Her first witness, a former Nexus executive, took the stand nervously. Elliot observed every twitch, every hesitation, noting inconsistencies in their statements even before he spoke a word. Then, it was Elliot's turn. He rose slowly, his presence commanding the room without arrogance. He had spent the entire night reviewing every piece of Julia's phone data, Mia's findings, and the countless emails proving Nexus's manipulation. He presented the evidence methodically, each document and message displayed for the jury and carefully explained. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice calm yet firm, "justice is not about wealth or intimidation. It is about truth, integrity, and fairness. This evidence clearly shows that Ariana Lockhart did not steal technology. She was targeted by a web of corporate power designed to suppress innovation and maintain control. The patterns are clear. The bribed witnesses, manipulated documents, and deliberate sabotage were all orchestrated." The courtroom was silent as he revealed the financial transfers to Bryce, the altered timelines, and the coordination between Nexus and Ariana's former lawyers. Every juror leaned forward, reading each document, listening to Elliot's precise explanations. He guided the witnesses, clarified points, and exposed lies without ever raising his voice. Julian Fenwick was called to the stand once more. This time her demeanor was steadier, bolstered by the security and confidence of having the truth behind her. She recounted how Nexus pressured her, the payments and threats she received, and her role in exposing the conspiracy. The jury's reaction was visible: silent nods, wide eyes, and tense, deliberate note-taking. She concluded, "I chose to do the right thing, and I am prepared to testify fully against those who orchestrated this against Ariana." Elliot's closing arguments followed, measured and powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the law is a tool to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ariana Lockhart is not a criminal. She is an innovator, a creator, and a target of those who feared the future she would bring. Today, the evidence proves not only her innocence but the lengths to which powerful interests will go to suppress justice. You now hold the truth in your hands." Judge Rourke listened, his eyes on the jury. Elliot's voice carried the weight of someone who had fought years of injustice and refused to bend under pressure. Morris's attempt at a rebuttal faltered. The jury could see the gaps, the inconsistencies, and the clear evidence of malfeasance. Every strategy she had relied upon crumbled under Elliot's meticulous preparation and unwavering logic. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The room went silent as Judge Rourke asked the foreperson to announce the verdict. The words echoed through the chamber: "We find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in a wave of relief, awe, and recognition of justice restored. Reporters scrambled to record the moment. Ariana, tears welling in her eyes, turned to Elliot and whispered, "We did it. We really won." Elliot smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "You never gave up," he said softly. "Not once. Not even when everything seemed impossible." In the weeks that followed, the city buzzed about the unprecedented case. Gregory Vance, Nexus executives, and their complicit partners were arrested and charged with bribery, perjury, and conspiracy. Julia entered protective custody in Canada but agreed to testify, her courage instrumental in bringing the entire network down. Atlantic Energy and Nexus Innovations faced public scrutiny, massive fines, and irreversible reputational damage. Elliot returned to his modest Queens apartment, but he knew his life had changed forever. Ariana invited him to join the Lockhart Legal Justice Fund, a new initiative to support civil rights and provide legal assistance to those unable to afford representation. Inspired by the experience and her father's courage, Mia enrolled in law school. Together, they launched Warren and Warren Law, a firm dedicated to fairness, justice, and protecting the powerless. One afternoon, in their still empty new office, Elliot, Ariana, and Mia celebrated quietly. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed through the bare room, and a sense of profound accomplishment filled the space. Elliot reflected on the journey, the years of hardship, betrayal, and perseverance that had led to this moment. He looked at Ariana, her blue eyes shining with gratitude and genuine respect. "I never properly thanked you," she said softly, "for believing in me when everyone else turned their backs." "There is nothing to thank me for," Elliot replied. "You gave me purpose again. You reminded me why fighting for justice matters." Ariana stepped closer, her hand brushing his. For the first time, she called him by his first name, Elliot. In that single word, there was trust, connection, and a deep recognition of all they had endured together. Elliot's heart, long closed since the death of his wife, felt something stir. Hope, warmth, possibility. Could life offer second chances? Could courage, integrity, and love intersect to give someone a fresh start? In that moment, he believed it could. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the quiet victories inside that small office. But Elliot, Ariana, and Mia had changed it for themselves, and for countless others who would benefit from their fight. Heroes, they realized, come in many forms. Sometimes, a janitor armed with knowledge, courage, and conviction can topple empires and restore justice. As the day ended, Elliot, Ariana, and Mia walked together past the courthouse, past the reporters, past the reminders of their battles. They were not just survivors. They were triumphant. They had proven that no matter the obstacles, courage and truth could prevail. Justice had been served, and love had found its way back into hearts that had once been broken. And as Elliot looked at Ariana and Mia, he whispered quietly to himself, "Hope never dies." Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you were moved by their journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage and justice. We'll see you in the next one.